Man, Valentine's Day in Iraq ain't about no flowers and candy. Back in 2017, the whole South Side stood still when the biggest member from Parkway, the heart of the OT Roy, got caught lacking in a local store. And the wild part? It was Terry Barry from TW who pulled that trigger, sparking a war that would turn the streets into a literal graveyard. Today, we are breaking down the most legendary hits, the get backs, and how the assassins became the hunted. September 2nd, 2007, Washington Park, Chicago. The summer was supposed to be winding down, but the heat on the south side only intensified as the streets claimed a life before it could even truly begin. Just 2 days away from starting the 8th grade, 14-year-old Xavier Washington, known to the blocks as Junebug, repping MOB, was caught in a lethal crossfire that served as a grim reminder that the streets have no age limit. Around 9 p.m., Junebug was sitting inside a gray Chevy with two older companions at the intersection of East 57th Street and South Wabash Avenue. The vibe was shattered when a Chevrolet Impala pulled alongside them with clinical precision. A gunman inside, identified by the streets as data from F Dollars, unleashed a heavy barrage of gunfire into the vehicle. Junebug was struck multiple times as the glass shattered and the night erupted in chaos. He was rushed to Stroger Hospital, but the injuries were too severe for a 14-year-old to fight off. He was pronounced dead a half hour later. His two companions, aged 20 and 22, survived the hit in stable condition, but the message had been sent. As the neighborhood gathered the next morning to mourn a child who would never see his 8th grade graduation, the tension remained at a breaking point. Even as mothers prayed on the sidewalk, rival sets sped through the block, flashing signs and shouting threats, proving that in the war between MOB and the Front Street Circle, the cycle of retaliation was already spinning before the first memorial candle could be lit. Junebug's name was added to the murals, another young soldier lost to the relentless friction of the South Side. September 14th, 2007, Woodlawn, Chicago. The violence on the South Side continued its ruthless harvest, proving once again that in the heart of the war zone, 14 is an age of execution rather than innocence. Around 8 p.m., the evening air on the 6200 block of South Langley Avenue was thick with the usual neighborhood chatter. Dalvin Miller, known to the streets as Dalvin repping Jaro City, was standing outside talking with friends, unaware that a predator was closing in through the shadows. In a clinical move that would define the brewing war between the rising powers of the South Side, a gunman stepped out from between two buildings, cutting through the darkness with lethal intent. The streets would later point the finger at a high-profile figure from the Brick City, and 600 circled the thing. Without a word, he unleashed a flurry of rounds, striking Dalvin in the back as the group scrambled for cover. The 14-year-old collapsed on the pavement while the shooter vanished back into the maze of brick and concrete. Dalvin was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in a desperate race against time, but the damage was done. He was pronounced dead at 9 p.m. While neighbors and family spoke of an average kid who loved basketball and stayed in school, the streets saw the hit as another calculated strike in an escalating blood feud. As Jaro City mourned another young face lost to the concrete, the name Dalvin became a rallying cry in a neighborhood where kids are forced to become soldiers long before they reach manhood. March 13th, 2008, Bronzeville, Chicago. The afternoon quiet on the 4800 block of South Drexel Avenue was shattered at 2:50 p.m. by a calculated strike that signaled a deadly shift in the South Side power dynamics. 20-year-old Carlos Merrill, known to the streets as Lost, repping 051 Young Money, was on the block just steps from his home when the shadows of the 4600 block came looking for him. In a clinical execution that the streets credit to the duo of Franco and Bo from THF 46, a vehicle pulled alongside Lost in what appeared to be a high-stakes drive-by. The gunman unleashed a heavy barrage of lead, striking Lost multiple times across his body, before he could find cover. The shooter sped away, disappearing back into THF territory as the echoes of the gunfire faded into the Bronzeville air. Lewis was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in a desperate attempt to save his life, but the damage from the multiple gunshot wounds was too severe. He was pronounced dead at 3:28 p.m., marking another heavy loss for the 051 circle. As the sirens converged on Drexel Avenue, the hit remained unsolved by the law, but the neighborhood knew the lines had been drawn even deeper. The name loss was added to the list of the fallen, fueling a friction between 051 and THF 46 that would ignite the streets for years to come. September 21st, 2008, Woodlawn, Chicago. The cycle of violence spun back to the 6200 block of East 62nd Street, proving once again that in the shadows of the South Side, the truce is a myth and the hunters are always active. Around the 400 block, 25-year-old Rodney King, known to the streets as Hottie, repping Jaro City, was caught in the sights of a familiar predator. Just over a year after the loss of Dalvin, the friction between Jaro City and the rising force of Brick City, soon to be known as 600, claimed another veteran. In a clinical execution, the shooter closed the distance and unleashed a lethal strike. The streets will once again point the finger at the Thang, the high-profile heavy hitter from the Brick City circle. Hottie was struck in the head, a targeted shot meant to ensure there would be no recovery. He collapsed on the pavement as the shooter vanished into the maze of the Woodlawn night. The response was rapid, but Hottie was pronounced dead at the scene, adding another name to a weekend of carnage that saw 8 people shot across the city. While the authorities scrambled to make sense of the bloodshed, the motive on the block was clear. This was another chapter in a relentless blood feud where the cost of repping Jaro was being paid in full. No arrests were made, and as the shooters remained in the wind, Hottie's name became another brick in the foundation of a war that was only beginning to heat up. September 27th, 2008, Grand Boulevard, Chicago. The friction between the 4600 block and the 051 circle reached a boiling point at a high-traffic crossroads where the streets and civilian life collide. 18-year-old Isaiah Walker, known to the blocks as Zico, repping 051 Young Money, was back in the city on a break from Ashford University, looking to catch a haircut and a meal before heading back to the books. But in the heart of the South Side, your past never stays in the rearview mirror. Around the 700 block of East 47th Street, Zico was in the parking lot of a McDonald's when the atmosphere turned lethal. An altercation broke out, a high-stakes face-to-face that didn't end in words. In a clinical execution, 28-year-old Akee Walton, known as Akee, repping THF 46, unleashed a barrage of gunfire, striking Zico multiple times at close range. As the college student collapsed on the asphalt, the shooter vanished into the Chicago afternoon, leaving behind a scene of absolute chaos at one of the neighborhood's busiest hubs. Zico succumbed to his injuries, a loss that sent shockwaves through the 051 lineup and turned his name into one of the most significant battle cries in the city's drill history. Akee managed to evade the law for months, fleeing to Indiana to hide out with relatives, but the reach of the feds eventually caught up with him in Indianapolis. While the state secured their suspect, the streets had already moved toward a point of no return. The murder of Zico didn't just take a life, it set the stage for a decade of relentless retaliation and a blood feud between THF 46 and 051 Young Money that would be written in the names of the dead. July 5th, 2009, Grand Boulevard, Chicago. The 4th of July weekend in Chicago is often marked by the smell of gunpowder, and for the South Side, that gunpowder rarely comes from fireworks. Around 10 to 15 a.m., the morning quiet on the 4700 block of South Forestville Avenue was shattered in a high-stakes ambush. 21-year-old Dominic Barnes, known as Dominic, repping 051 Young Money, was on the block when the shadows of the rival set closed in. in a clinical execution that the streets credit to a heavy-hitting duo from THF 46, Bezu and Brew. A gray Chevrolet Monte Carlo pulled to a sudden halt. Multiple gunmen exited the vehicle with lethal intent, unleashing a heavy barrage of gunfire before Dominic could even register the threat. He was struck several times as the shooters stood their ground, ensuring the hit was completed before piling back into the Monte Carlo and vanishing into the Southside maze. Dominic was pronounced dead shortly after, marking another high-profile loss for the 051 Circle at the hands of their most bitter rivals. The hit went down in broad daylight, a bold statement in a weekend of absolute carnage that left 6 dead across the city. While authorities scoured the scene for witnesses and searched for the gray Chevy, the motive was already understood on the pavement. The blood feud between 051 and THF 46 had claimed another soldier, deepening a divide that no amount of police presence could bridge. August 25, 2010, Parkway Gardens, Chicago. The humidity of a late August night in Woodlawn was heavy with the scent of an escalating war. Around 11:30 p.m., the intersection of 64th Street and South King Drive erupted into absolute chaos as a massive street fight broke out, drawing a crowd of dozens and the immediate attention of the CPD. But while the officers focused on the brawling bodies, the true killers were moving through the shadows with a different kind of intent. 29-year-old Laverick Marshall, known to the blocks as Reezy, repping Wake City, was caught in the middle of the storm. As the crowd began to scatter under the pressure of the police response, a gunman took advantage of the confusion. The streets would later pin the trigger pull on a young, high-profile shooter from the STL EBT circle, Wooski. In the heat of the scramble, Reezy was struck in the back by a clinical shot that sent him to the pavement as the shooter vanished into the dark corridors of the neighborhood. Officers clearing the scene found Reezy unresponsive, his life fading as the sirens echoed off the brick walls of the old block apartments. He was rushed to Stroger Hospital, but the damage was done. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The loss of Reezy sent shockwaves through the WIIC city lineup, marking a pivotal moment in the friction between the 6400 block and their rivals to the east. As the police filed their reports on a street fight turned deadly, the sets knew the truth. Another soldier had been taken off the board, and the cycle of retaliation was being fueled for a new decade of drill. September 22, 2010, Woodlawn, Chicago. The war between the 6400 block and Jaro City reached a fever pitch in broad daylight, just weeks after the streets had mourned the loss of Reezy. Around 1:50 p.m., the intersection of 63rd Street and Rhodes Avenue became the stage for a high-profile execution. 20-year-old Jeremy Marshall, known to the streets as Lil 4, repping Jaro City, and the brother of STL's Kells and Rose, was on the block when the shadows of WIIC City closed in a clinical hunt that the streets credit to a trio of heavy hitters. OD, Trey 5, and Boss Top, Lil 4 was approached by 2 individuals with lethal intent. As the confrontation turned violent, the gunman unleashed a barrage of shots. Lil 4 was struck in the back, a fatal wound that left him running on adrenaline for just a few moments before he collapsed on the concrete. The assailants didn't linger. They vanished into a waiting vehicle and sped away, leaving the neighborhood in a state of shock as the sirens began to wail. Lil 4 was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, but he was declared dead shortly after arrival. The loss of a member with such deep blood ties to both Jaro City and STL sent a ripple of fury through the rival sets, marking a point of no return in the Woodlawn conflict. While police claimed there was no immediate link to a second shooting that occurred just blocks away an hour later, the streets knew better. The name Lil 4 was etched into the history of the South Side, fueling a cycle of retaliation that would eventually lead to some of the most infamous moments in the city's drill era. March 4th, 2011, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The friction on the South Side is often a maze of shifting alliances and mistaken identities, where being in the wrong zip code at the wrong time carries the ultimate price. Around 8:45 a.m., The morning quiet on the 6500 block of South Rhodes Avenue was broken by a clinical execution that would spark years of debate in the streets. 27-year-old Marcus Richmond, known to some as Rico, a member of D Block and a close affiliate of TYMB, was walking through the heart of rival territory. While many street legends mistakenly link Marcus to STL/EBT, the reality was much more complicated. Marcus was reportedly in the neighborhood visiting a female friend when the predators of the 6400 block spotted a target. In a bold daylight move, a gunman approached on foot, closing the gap with cold intent. The streets point the finger at a high-profile veteran from WIIC City, Trey 5. 3 shots were fired at close range, striking Marcus and sending him to the pavement as the shooter fled south, disappearing into the residential stretch. Marcus was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, but he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The hit left the neighborhood reeling and created a whirlwind of misinformation. While some claimed STL had lost a soldier to Trey 5, the deeper truth was that a TYMB affiliate had been caught deep in the Tukaville trenches. Regardless of the label, the result was the same. Another name added to the murals and another body fueling the fire between the South Side's most violent factions. No one was taken into custody, and the shooters remained in the wind as Calumet area detectives began their search for answers in the Woodlawn dust. April 8, 2011, Bronzeville, Chicago. The Friday evening rush hour near the intersection of 46th Street and Cottage Grove Avenue was transformed into a scene of absolute carnage just before 5 p.m. As postal workers sorted mail and commuters headed home, the ongoing war between the 4600 block and the 051 circle claimed a young life in a high-visibility ambush. 18-year-old Quentin Turner, known to the streets as Quint, repping THF 46, was standing in the 800 block of East 46th Street with a group of companions when a vehicle cut through the traffic with lethal intent. In a clinical drive-by that the streets credit to a high-profile shooter from the 051 Young Money lineup, Montana, a flurry of rounds was unleashed from the passing car. Quint was struck multiple times, including a catastrophic wound to the head that left him lifeless in the middle of the road. The gunfire didn't stop with him. A 20-year-old man was struck in the leg and ankle, and a 17-year-old boy suffered a broken leg from the impact of the lead. As the shooter sped away, vanishing into the South Side maze, members of a nearby firehouse rushed into the street to tend to the bodies scattered across the pavement. Quint was rushed to Mercy Hospital and Medical Center, but he was pronounced dead at 5:45 p.m. The loss of Quint hit the THF 46 circle hard, occurring just steps away from their home base and serving as a brutal reminder of Montana's reputation in the trenches. While neighbors spoke of a growing nausea and anger at the relentless violence creeping into their sanctuary, the sets only saw another reason for retaliation. Quint's name was added to the growing list of martyrs in the 46-051 blood feud, a conflict where the warm spring air was quickly being replaced by the cold reality of an all-out street war. July 16, 2011, Kenwood, Chicago. The summer heat on the South Side turned clinical just after 1 p.m. in a neighborhood usually known for its quiet, close-knit streets and its proximity to the Obama family home. The peace of the 1100 block of East 47th Street was shattered by a burst of broad daylight gunfire that claimed a young man whose presence was quite literally larger than life. 20-year-old Tony McCoy, known to the blocks as Little Tony, was targeted just yards from his front door. Standing at a lean 7 feet tall, Tony was a local standout, a quarterback and basketball player whose height and vision made him a legend in the Park District leagues. The streets and reports later pointed toward a high-profile hunter from the 051 Young Money Circle, Montana, marking yet another surgical strike in the ongoing war, with THF 46. Tony was struck down in a flurry of rounds, his massive frame collapsing on the very pavement he had lived on since he was 5 years old. As a crowd of dozens gathered behind the red crime tape, the air was thick with disbelief. Tony wasn't a soldier. He was the son of a respected community mentor and had dreams of heading to college. His family revealed he had been robbed just 2 days prior, but had stayed silent on the perpetrators, a decision that may have preceded the final fatal encounter. While city fire trucks washed the blood from the street, his mother sat in silent wild grief on a nearby hydrant. The loss of little Tony was a heavy blow that transcended gang lines, proving that in the relentless friction between 051 and the 46, even those reaching for a different future can be pulled back into the cycle of the streets. July 17, 2011, Washington Park, Chicago. The heat of the mid-July night was thick, but the atmosphere on the 6000 block of South Prairie Avenue turned ice cold just before 1 a.m. The brewing war between the MOB circle and the newly formed power of 600 was about to claim one of the most respected figures in the Brick City lineage. 19-year-old Marcus London, known to the streets as Baldy, a foundational member of 600, was standing outside with a companion when the night turned lethal. In a calculated strike that would resonate through the South Side for years, a gunman emerged from the shadows with clinical intent. The streets would later credit the trigger pull to a high-profile heavy hitter from MOB Domo. A flurry of rounds was unleashed, catching Baldy in the head and striking his companion in the ankle. As Baldy collapsed on the pavement of Prairie Avenue, the shooter vanished into the dark corridors of Washington Park, leaving behind a scene that would shift the trajectory of the drill war forever. Baldy was rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital, fighting for his life throughout the day, but the damage was irreversible. He was pronounced dead at 4:30 p.m. that afternoon. The loss of Baldy was a massive blow to the 600 circle, leading to the legendary Baldy World tributes and fueling a level of friction that saw no limits. As the news of his passing hit the blocks, the grief quickly turned into a hunger for retaliation, ensuring that the name Baldy would be etched into the murals and the lyrics of a generation of soldiers. No one was taken into custody, and the shooters remained in the wind, but the war for Prairie Avenue had just entered its deadliest chapter. August 10th, 2011, Parkway Gardens, Chicago. The night air around the sprawling concrete fortress of the 6400 block was about to witness a hit that would change the landscape of the South Side forever. Around 11:35 p.m., the atmosphere near the entrance of the complex turned clinical. 20-year-old Odie Perry, a high-profile, respected figure repping WIIC City, was caught in a crosshair that had been moving toward him for months. In a move that would become the stuff of street legend and drill history, a duo of young hunters from the STL EBT circle, KI and FBG Buda, closed the gap on the 400 block of East 64th Street. A heavy barrage of gunfire erupted, catching OD multiple times, including a fatal strike to the neck. As OD collapsed near the gates of the very complex he called home, the shooters vanished into the woodlawn shadows, leaving behind a scene of absolute chaos. The response was massive. Police temporarily locked down the surrounding streets, turning the area into a maze of yellow tape and flashing lights. OD was rushed to Stroger Hospital, but the damage was done. He was pronounced dead at 12:18 a.m. The loss of OD didn't just claim a life, it rebranded a block. In the wake of the execution, WIIC City would transform into the legendary O Block, a name that would echo from the South Side to the global stage. The hit solidified the reputation of K1 as a lethal force in the trenches and ignited a cycle of high-stakes retaliation that would burn through the heart of Chicago for the next decade. No arrests were made that night, but the streets had already written the name Odie into the foundation of the war. September 13th, 2011, Washington Park, Chicago. The South Side was still reeling from the loss of OD when the war between the 6000 block and Jaro City claimed its most lethal architect. Around 3:40 p.m., the broad daylight of the 6100 block of South King Drive became the setting for a high-stakes hunt. 18-year-old Devin Varner, known to the world as Defong, the founder and primary engine behind the 600 Circle, was caught in the sights of a predator who wouldn't be denied. The sequence of events was as desperate as it was clinical. Tyquan was sitting in the back of a parked vehicle when he was spotted by a shooter identified by the streets as Dome, a heavy hitter from Jaro City. In a frantic attempt to survive, Tyquan dove from the car and managed to evade the gunman, sprinting 3 blocks in a race for his life. But the pursuit didn't end. Dome closed the gap near King Drive, catching Tyquan and unleashing a flurry of rounds. The man who had been the face of the Brick City and 600 movement was struck in the back, collapsing on the pavement as the shooter vanished into the woodlawn maze. Tyquan was rushed to Stroger Hospital, but the damage was absolute. He was pronounced dead shortly after. The loss of Tyquan was a catastrophic blow to the 600 lineup, removing the set's most influential figure just 1 year after its inception. As the news spread, the D Block and 600 monikers took on a new weight, and the thirst for retaliation reached a level the neighborhood had never seen. No arrests were made, and as the shooters remained in the wind, the name Tyquan became the ultimate rallying cry in a blood feud that was now burning out of control. September 19, 2011, Washington Park, Chicago. The cycle of retaliation between the 6000 block and the MOB circle was spinning at a breakneck pace, claiming lives faster than the murals could be painted. Just 6 days after celebrating his 17th birthday, and only a week after the loss of Tyquan, Stephen McGee, known to the streets as Lil Steve, repping 600, was walking through the heart of the friction on the 6000 block of South Prairie Avenue. Around 5:50 p.m., the atmosphere on the block was thick with tension. A man passing by on a bicycle tried to throw a warning, telling Lil Steve that guys with guns were lurking in a nearby alley. But before the 17-year-old could move, the shadows became lethal. 1 or 2 gunmen emerged from the alley with clinical intent. The streets would later point the finger at a young, high-profile hunter from the MOB lineup, Lil Scrap. A barrage of gunfire erupted, catching Lil Steve in the head and upper torso before he could find a way out. Lil Steve was rushed to Stroger Hospital in a desperate attempt to save another young life, but he was pronounced dead shortly after. The loss of Lil Steve was a devastating blow to the 600 circle, occurring on the very same block where Baldy had been taken out just months prior. As the Steve Drive moniker began to take hold, the blood feud between 600 and MOB reached a point of no return. While Calumet area detectives scoured the scene for leads, the shooters vanished into the Southside maze, leaving behind a neighborhood gripped by the cold reality that in this war, even a warning isn't enough to stop the lead. September 26, 2011, Washington Park, Chicago. The friction between Jaro City and the Brick City remnants claimed another life in broad daylight. Around 4:12 p.m., 21-year-old Carl Spencer, known to the streets as Jizzle, repping Brick City, was walking on the 400 block of East 61st Street. A group of men approached him on foot, and within seconds, one gunman stepped forward and opened fire. The streets point to Tutu from Jaro City as the shooter. Jizzle was struck in the head, shoulder, and abdomen. He was rushed to Stroger Hospital in critical condition, but later succumbed to his injuries. The gunman vanished into the neighborhood, leaving Jaro City to claim another strike in the escalating war. No arrests were made. October 18, 2011, Parkway Gardens, Chicago. The war for the 6400 block intensified when a high-stakes hit was carried out deep inside old block territory. Around 7:55 p.m., 20-year-old Edward Riley, known as Platoon, repping Old Block, was walking with his girlfriend near 63rd and King Drive. 2 shooters in dark clothing, identified by the streets as Wooski and Brick from STL EBT, approached and unleashed a barrage of gunfire. Platoon was struck multiple times and collapsed. The gunman continued down the block, shooting a 15-year-old boy in the head before vanishing into the night. Platoon was rushed to Stroger Hospital but was pronounced dead at 10:17 p.m. The scene at Parkway Gardens turned into a riot as crowds flooded the area, blocking ambulances and forcing police to disperse their onlookers. No arrests were made, but the loss of Platoon marked another surgical strike by STL in the heart of the O. November 10th, 2011, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The cycle of retaliation for Jizzle's death came full circle in a dark alley on the 6200 block of South Eberhard Avenue. Around 10 p.m., a man walking his dog made a grim discovery: the body of 17-year-old Carlton Archer, known to the streets as Tutu, repping Jaro City. Tutu had been targeted in a clinical execution, suffering gunshot wounds to the head and torso. The streets credit the hit to a high-profile, cold-blooded shooter from the 600 Circle, CDAI. The gunman vanished into the night, leaving Tutu's body to be found long after the echoes of the shots had faded. His death sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, leading to the creation of Tutu Gang as Jaro City moved to honor their fallen soldier. No one was taken into custody, and the shooter remained in the wind, but the execution of Tutu marked one of the most significant losses in the war between 600 and Jaro. November 10th, 2011, Washington Park, Chicago. The same night, the streets claimed Tutu. The war between the rising power of 600 and the 051 Young Money Circle claimed another victim. Around 12:28 a.m., 18-year-old Terrence Streets, known to the blocks as T Streets, repping 051 YM, was sitting inside a vehicle on LaSalle Street when the night turned lethal. A shooter, identified by the streets as Mathang from 600, closed in and unleashed a clinical strike. T Streets was struck in the face at close range, leaving him no chance of survival. He was pronounced dead at the scene by responding officers. The shooter vanished into the dark corridor between Garfield Boulevard and 57th Street before a perimeter could be set. The execution of T Streets added more fuel to the growing friction between 051 and the 600 Circle. No arrests were made, and with the shooters remaining in the wind, the name T Streets became another chapter in a long-standing blood feud where the cost of loyalty was paid in full. December 3rd, 2011, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The winter air turned lethal at approximately 4 p.m. on the 6200 block of South Street, Lawrence Avenue. 16-year-old Dale Fisher, repping STL/EBT, was on the block when a silver two-door vehicle cut through the street with cold intent. As the car pulled alongside him, a gunman leaned out the window and unleashed a barrage of gunfire. The streets point the finger at D. Rose, a high-profile hunter from the 600 Circle. Dale was struck twice in the chest, collapsing as the vehicle sped away from the scene. He was rushed to Stroger Hospital, but the injuries were too severe for the teenager to overcome. He was pronounced dead at 4:24 p.m. The hit marked another surgical strike in the ongoing blood feud between STL and the 600 O Block Alliance. No arrests were made, and the shooter vanished into the South Side night, leaving Dale's name to be added to the STL murals. February 2nd, 2012, Washington Park, Chicago. The friction between the 6000 block and the 051 Circle claimed another high-profile soldier in the freezing February night. Around 10:10 p.m., 20-year-old Shaquille Rush, known to the streets as Shaq, repping 600, was on the 5900 block of South Calumet Avenue, just blocks from his home, in a clinical ambush that the streets credit to the lethal duo of Melly and Kiddo from 051 Young Money. A barrage of gunfire erupted. Shaq was struck multiple times, including a catastrophic wound to the head that left him lifeless on the pavement. A 16-year-old girl standing with him was lucky to escape with only a graze wound as the shooters vanished into the south side darkness. Shaq was pronounced dead at the scene, marking a heavy loss for the 600 lineup and a major strike for 051 in the heart of rival territory. The shooters remained in the wind, but the execution of Shaq added a new level of intensity to a blood feud that was quickly becoming the most violent in the city. February 16th, 2012, Parkway Gardens, Chicago. The war between the 6400 block and STL/EBT claimed another foundational member in a cold-blooded evening strike. Around 6:46 p.m., 19-year-old Sharoy Liggins, repping WYII, C-City and O-Block, was on the 6400 block of South King Drive when the night turned lethal. In an encounter that the streets credit to Boss Trell, a high-profile specialist from the STL/EBT circle, a single shot was fired with surgical precision. The bullet struck Sharoid in the head, sending him to the pavement as the shooter vanished into the woodlawn shadows. while some in the streets, including Lil Durk, would later claim it was a lucky ricochet. The result was a definitive blow to the Oshiroi was rushed to Stroger Hospital in critical condition, fighting for his life for 4 days before finally succumbing to his injuries on Monday night. His death marked another heavy loss for the O Block veterans and solidified Boss Trell's reputation in the trenches. No arrests were made, and the shooter remained in the wind as the neighborhood prepared for the inevitable retaliation. April 28, 2012, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The friction between the 6400 block and STL EBT ignited once again during a violent 2-hour stretch in Woodlawn. Around 9:30 p.m., 21-year-old Marlon Monroe, known to the streets as Lil Doc, repping STL EBT, was on the 6300 block of South Street Lawrence Avenue when he was targeted in a clinical strike. In an encounter that the streets credit to T. Roy, a high-profile heavy hitter from O Block, a single shot was unleashed with lethal intent. Lil Doc was struck in the chest and collapsed on the pavement as the shooter vanished into the night. He was rushed to Stroger Hospital, but the wound was fatal. He was pronounced dead at 10:14 p.m. Lil Doc's death marked the 7th slaying in Woodlawn that year, serving as a direct response in the ongoing blood feud with the O. Despite 2 other shootings occurring within blocks of the scene that same night, no arrests were made. T. Roy remained in the wind, his reputation as a top-tier hunter for the 6400 block only growing as STL mourned another soldier. May 28, 2012, Bronzeville, Chicago. The Memorial Day weekend was marked by a relentless streak of violence that reached a boiling point in the early hours of Monday morning. Around 1:20 a.m., 35-year-old Robert McNair, known to the streets as Lil Chief, repping 051 Young Money, was caught in an alley on the 5000 block of South Street Lawrence Avenue in a clinical execution that the streets credit to Bobo, a high-profile heavy hitter from THF 46. A barrage of .45 caliber rounds was unleashed. Lil Chief was struck in the chest, a targeted hit that left him with no chance of survival, while those close to him said he was attempting to change his life and move away from the friction. The streets of Bronzeville proved unforgiving. Lil Chief was pronounced dead shortly after, marking another high-stakes loss for the 051 Circle in their long-standing blood feud with the 46. Police recovered multiple shell casings at the scene, but the shooters had already vanished into the night. No arrests were made, and Lil Chief's name was added to the list of those whose futures were cut short by the relentless cycle of the South Side. June 22, 2012, Englewood, Chicago. The war between the 6000 block and 051 Young Money reached a dark peak when the streets claimed one of its youngest soldiers. Around 8:40 p.m., 14-year-old Antonio Davis, known to the blocks as Fat Head, repping 051 YLEM, was walking near the 7000 block of South Union Avenue in a cold-blooded execution that the streets credit to the lethal duo of CDAI and D. Rose from 600. A gray van pulled to a sudden halt. A passenger in a dark hoodie exited with a firearm and unleashed a flurry of rounds. As Fathead fell to the pavement, the shooter stood over him and continued firing, ensuring the hit was completed. The gunman then piled back into the van and vanished into the Englewood night. Fathead was found dead at the scene with multiple gunshot wounds to his head and body. While his family spoke of a kid who only wanted to play basketball, the streets saw the hit as a massive blow to the 051 Circle. The execution of Fathead at just 14 years old remains one of the most infamous moments in the 051-600 blood feud, a surgical strike that left the South Side reeling. No one was taken into custody. June 24, 2012, Woodlawn, Chicago. The violence on the South Side took a tragic turn within the same circle when a 13-year-old life was cut short by friendly fire. Around 1:26 a.m., Tyquan Tyler, repping Jaro City, was on the 6200 block of South Rhodes Avenue, just blocks from his home. In a chaotic sequence that the streets credit to Wayne and Nate, fellow members of the Jaro City lineup, shots were fired from a vehicle. While intended for rivals, the rounds went astray, striking Tyquan in the chest. He was rushed to Coma Children's Hospital, but the damage was irreversible. He was pronounced dead at 3:05 a.m. Tyquan became another young face on the mules of Woodlawn, and his death eventually led to the naming of the Tyquan World set. Despite the tragedy occurring within their own ranks, no one was taken into custody that night. The shooters remained in the wind, leaving the set to mourn a 13-year-old soldier lost to the very friction they helped create. June 30th, 2012, Bronzeville, Chicago. The friction between the 4600 block and 051 Young Money reached a level of high-powered carnage just after 10 p.m. 17-year-old Paris Hobson, known to the streets as Black, repping THF 46, was on the 800 block of East 45th Street when a vehicle came to a sudden halt. In a clinical execution that the streets credit to Lil Mick from 051 Young Money, a gunman emerged armed with an AK-47 assault rifle. He unleashed a barrage of at least 10 rounds, catching Black in the head and ensuring he was dead at the scene. The shooter piled back into the vehicle and vanished before the echoes of the heavy artillery could fade from the Bronzeville air. The use of an assault rifle in broad territory marked a significant escalation in the blood feud, proving that 051 was willing to use maximum force to take out THF's frontline soldiers. Black was pronounced dead on the pavement, and while police scoured the area for the vehicle, no arrests were made. The name Black was etched into the history of the 46, fueling a desire for retaliation that would keep the South Side in a state of constant war. August 8, 2012, Woodlawn, Chicago. The war between Jaro City and the 6400 block reached a fever pitch near the intersection of 63rd and King Drive. Around 11:30 p.m., 19-year-old Tony Dunn, known to the streets as White, repping O-Block, was targeted in a high-risk hit right in front of patrolling officers. In a bold execution credited to 50 shots from Jaro City, the gunman opened fire, striking White in the back. Grand Crossing District officers witnessed the shooting and immediately engaged the suspect. The shooter turned his weapon on the police, sparking an exchange of gunfire before he attempted to flee. White was rushed to Stroger Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Following a search of the area, police apprehended a suspect, 50 shots, who had been wounded in the leg during the shootout. While no officers were injured, the hit was a major blow to Old Block, occurring just outside their gates. The name White was added to the set's list of fallen martyrs, and 50 Shots' willingness to engage the police solidified his status as a legendary figure in the Jaro City lineup. October 13, 2012, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The war between the 6400 block and STL EBT claimed a young life in an ambush on the 6300 block of South Rhodes Avenue. Around 9:30 p.m., 17-year-old Richard Medell McCambry and his 18-year-old cousin were walking to meet a girl when they were targeted. In a clinical execution credited to King Vaughn, a high-profile hunter from O Block, a gunman approached on foot and unleashed a barrage of shots at close range. Model was struck in the chest and his cousin was hit multiple times. While the cousin survived his injuries, Model was rushed to Stroger Hospital where he was pronounced dead. The hit, captured on pod camera footage, was a major strike for the O against STL EBT. Model's family maintained he was just a kid caught in a gang feud, but the streets saw it as a definitive move by King Vaughn to solidify his reputation. No arrests were made, and the shooter vanished back to Parkway Gardens, leaving Model's name as a permanent fixture in the Woodlawn conflict. October 30th, 2012, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The war for the South Side claimed another major figure in a brutal morning ambush. Around 9:13 a.m., 23-year-old Derek P5 Johnson, also known as Crack, a high-profile member of Jaro City, was caught on the 6200 block of South Eberhard Avenue in a surgical strike that the streets credit to a trio of heavy hitters from O Block. J Money, King Von, and Big A. P5 was targeted with overwhelming force. He was struck multiple times as the shooters unleashed a flurry of rounds, leaving him no chance to escape. P5 was rushed to Stroger Hospital but was pronounced dead at 9:54 a.m. The hit was widely seen as direct retaliation for the death of White, as well as a result of personal friction involving J Money. The loss of P5 was a significant blow to Jaro City's front line, further establishing the O Block trio's lethal reputation in the trenches. No one was taken into custody, and the shooters vanished before the scene was swarmed by police. November 1st, 2012, Washington Park, Chicago. The friction between 600 and 051 Young Money claimed another life in a clinical morning strike. Around 9:40 a.m., 19-year-old Trey Henry, known to the streets as Tricks, repping 600, was caught in an alley on the 5700 block of South Prairie Avenue. A Wentworth district officer heard the gunfire and discovered Tricks shot inside a vehicle. The streets credit the execution to Kiddo from 051 Young Money, who unleashed a barrage of shots before vanishing. Tricks was rushed to Stroger Hospital but was pronounced dead at 10:30 a.m. Following his death, a controversy erupted within the set as several prominent members of 600 reportedly disowned him, claiming he wasn't official despite his affiliation. Nevertheless, the hit was a clear strike for 051 in rival territory. No arrests were made, and Tricks' name became a point of contention in the Drill Era's complex internal politics. November 8th, 2012, Wrightwood, Chicago. The war between STL EBT and O Block reached a turning point with the elimination of one of the city's most feared specialists. Around 6:50 a.m., 17-year-old Rodney Stewart, known to the world as Boss Trell, the legendary cleaner for STL EBT, was discovered in the 2600 block of West 83rd Street in a clinical hit that the streets credit to T. Roy from O Block. Boss Trell was targeted and shot in the head. Police found him in critical condition with a weapon still underneath him, suggesting he may have been lured or caught off guard before he could react. He was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center but succumbed to his injuries that night. Boss Trell was reportedly planning to leave Chicago for Iowa to escape the violence just days before he was killed. His death was a massive blow to STL EBT, removing their top tactician and providing the O with definitive get back for She-Roy. No arrests were made, and T-Roy's reputation as a top-tier hunter was further solidified in the trenches. November 19th, 2012, Washington Park, Chicago. The friction between the 6000 block and MOB claimed a veteran life in a targeted night strike. Around 8:20 p.m., 32-year-old James Holman, repping MOB, was outside his home on the 6000 block of South Michigan Avenue when the hit squad closed in. As a group exited a nearby apartment building, 4 males approached the scene. In a coordinated attack credited by the streets to bite down and blast his ass from 600, at least one gunman opened fire. James was struck in the chest and forearm, collapsing near his doorstep as the assailants vanished into the darkness. He was rushed to Holy Cross Hospital but was pronounced dead at 8:54 p.m. The execution of a veteran member like James served as a heavy blow to the MOB circle and signaled that the 600 hunters were operating with clinical precision. No suspects were taken into custody, leaving the shooters in the wind and the neighborhood on edge. September 3rd, 2013, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The war for the South Side reached a boiling point on Labor Day when the 6400 block lost one of its most charismatic and connected figures. Around 2 p.m., 21-year-old Jerome Wood, known to the streets as J Money, a top-tier soldier for O Block, was on the 6600 block of South Rhodes Avenue when a high-stakes ambush was initiated. In a surgical strike credited to the lethal duo of Lil B and KLY from STL EBT, J Money was targeted in broad daylight. A barrage of shots rang out, striking him in the head and body. He collapsed in a vacant lot next to a Greystone building as the shooters vanished into the Woodlawn maze. Neighbors reported hearing the gunfire followed by a woman's screams. J Money was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead at 2:55 p.m. J Money was a foundational member of O Block and a close friend of King Von. His influence bridged the gaps between OTF, GBE, and 600. His death was a massive blow to the Black Disciple Alliance and ignited an immediate hunger for revenge. No arrests were made at the scene, leaving the O to mourn a beloved member whose loss redefined the friction between King Drive and STL. September 26, 2013, South Shore, Chicago. The drill scene lost one of its brightest rising stars in a clinical ambush that shook the city. Around 6:25 p.m., 17-year-old Leonard Anderson, known globally as L.A. Capone, a premier talent from 600, was walking to a vehicle after leaving a recording studio near 71st Street and Stony Island Avenue. As he reached the car, a gunman approached on foot and unleashed a barrage of shots. In a hit credited to Lil Mick from 051 Young Money, LA was struck in the hip and lower back. The shooters vanished into the south side traffic before backup could arrive. LA was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital and fought for his life in surgery for hours, but he was pronounced dead at 8:30 p.m. The loss of L.A. Capone was a catastrophic blow to the 600 Circle and the drill movement at large, as he was widely considered the next to make it out. His execution served as a brutal reminder of the reach of the 051-600 blood feud. While Lil Mick was eventually charged for the murder, the night of the shooting left the trenches in a state of shock, cementing LA's legacy as a fallen legend of the 600 block. November 14th, 2013, Woodlawn, Chicago. The relentless blood feud between the 4600 block and 051 Young Money claimed a high-profile life at a gas station on the 6600 block of South Stony Island Avenue. Around 5:56 p.m., 24-year-old Amanda Fitch, known to the streets as Big A, a prominent figure from 051 Young Money, was sitting in a small gray sedan at the pumps when the night turned lethal. In a coordinated hit credited to a THF 46 trio, Dre Money, Westbrook, and Lil Ant, a vehicle pulled up and unleashed a barrage of gunfire. 3 rounds shattered the driver's side window, striking Big A. The shooters sped away immediately, leaving the car riddled with bullets as bystanders scrambled for cover. She was rushed to Stroger Hospital but was pronounced dead at 6:53 p.m. Big A was a respected and foundational member of the 051 Circle, and her death sent shockwaves through the set. Photos from the scene showed the clinical nature of the strike, with yellow evidence flags marking the casings left behind by the THF hunters. No one was immediately taken into custody, and the execution of Big A served as another high-stakes chapter in the ongoing war for dominance on the South Side. January 12, 2014, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The friction within the allied blocks of Woodlawn took a tragic internal turn in the late hours of a Sunday night. Around 11:20 p.m., 16-year-old Marquise Harris, known to the streets as Lil Mo, repping Tyquan World, was at a gathering in a basement apartment on the 6200 block of South Street Lawrence Avenue. What started as a domestic argument between Lil Mo and his girlfriend escalated when another male intervened. The situation spiraled into a physical fight. According to police and street accounts, the intervener, identified as Manny Fresh from STL EBT, left the apartment only to return moments later with a firearm. He opened fire, striking Lil Mo in the chest at close range. Lil Mo was still conscious when first responders arrived, but he succumbed to his injuries at Stroger Hospital at 12:05 a.m. The scene outside the tan brick building was grim, with detectives scouring a snowy vacant lot for evidence as the realization set in that the shooter was from within their own circle. The death of Lil Mo created a deep rift between the younger Tyquan World members and the older STL EBT generation, marking one of the most significant internal losses in the area's history. February 12, 2014, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The war between the Black Disciple Alliance and the younger generation of Woodlawn claimed one of its youngest victims in a brutal drive-by. Around 8:20 p.m., 14-year-old Venzel Richardson, known to the streets as Big V, repping Tyquan World, was walking with two other teens on the 6100 block of South Vernon Avenue. A white van suddenly pulled alongside the group. In a clinical strike credited by the streets to a duo from the BD Alliance, Lil Loss from FrontStreet and D Rose from 600, a gunman inside the vehicle opened fire. Venzel was struck in the head and collapsed instantly, dying on the scene. The shooter sped away, leaving the neighborhood in a state of chaos. Venzel was a freshman at Dunbar High School and a member of the ROTC program. His mother, Laveda Richardson, had just buried Venzel's friend, Lil Mo, 1 month prior. The execution of Big V at just 14 years old sparked massive outrage and further fueled the intense blood feud between Tyquan World and the 600/FrontStreet/Old Block Alliance. No immediate arrests were made, and the shooters remained in the wind, leaving a family and a set to mourn a life cut short. March 28, 2014, Bronzeville, Chicago. The war between 051 Young Money and the 4600/6000 Alliance reached a fever pitch with the elimination of one of the most prominent figures in the drill era. Around 1:30 p.m., 20-year-old Mark Campbell, known globally as Lil Mark, the lead factor for 051 Young Money, was standing at a bus stop on the 300 block of East 51st Street. In a clinical and high-profile execution credited to Twilla from THF 46 and D Rose from 600, a silver minivan with Florida plates pulled up to the curb. A gunman emerged with a handgun equipped with an extended magazine and unleashed a barrage of shots at close range. Lil Mark was struck in the head and died instantly at the scene, only days after releasing a provocative diss track that had intensified the friction between the sets. The shooters fled the scene and later torched the minivan in the 3700 block of South Ellis Avenue to destroy evidence. Lil Mark's death was a massive blow to the 051 circle, occurring in broad daylight under the gaze of a police POD camera. While the streets immediately identified the hitters, the case remained a cornerstone of the 051 THF 600 blood feud, marking the loss of a foundational voice in the Young Money movement. April 9, 2014, West Englewood, Chicago. The war between the Black Disciple Alliance and the STL/MOB coalition claimed a major figure just as he was on the verge of mainstream stardom. Around 9:30 p.m., 30-year-old Mario Hess, known to the world as Blood Money or Big Glow, a foundational member of FrontStreet and cousin to Chief Keef, was outside his family's home in the 5600 block of South Elizabeth Street in a high-stakes ambush credited by the streets to the lethal pairing of KY from STL/EBT and Bay Bay from MOB. Multiple gunmen opened fire. Blood Money was struck in the chest, while his cousin, Darnell Patton, was hit in the abdomen. Blood Money had signed a major deal with Interschool Records just 2 weeks prior and had recently returned from Los Angeles. He was pronounced dead shortly after, leaving behind 5 children. The hit was seen as a devastating blow to the FrontStreet and GBE camp, fueled by both gang rivalry and, according to family, intense jealousy over his success. The execution occurred in the heart of the Elizabeth Street territory, marking a bold strike by the STL/MOB Alliance against one of the BD's most visible figures. No immediate arrests were made, and the shooters vanished into the night, further cementing the legend of the assassin KR1 just days before her own story would reach its end. April 11, 2014, West Woodlawn, Chicago. The war between the 6400 block and STL EBT reached its most cinematic and devastating conclusion with the fall of the assassin of Eberhard. Around 3:30 p.m., 17-year-old Akira Barnes, known globally as KE, the premier hunter for STL EBT, was walking to a neighborhood barbecue when she was targeted on a porch in the 6400 block of South Eberhard Avenue. In a clinical execution that the streets and eventually official police records released years later credited to King Vaughn and Big A from O Block, a gunman emerged and unleashed a barrage of shots, Kay was struck 9 times, including fatal wounds to the jaw and chest. 2 others with her were wounded, but survived. She was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, but was pronounced dead at 5:43 p.m. K.I. had gained notoriety for her alleged role in the deaths of multiple O Block and 600 members, and her death was the ultimate get-back for the Black Disciple Alliance. Her mother, Chantel Brown, described the environment as an ongoing war, a sentiment echoed by the city as the news of the 17-year-old's death went viral. The hit on K1 solidified King Von's reputation as a top-tier specialist and marked the end of an era for STL EBT. No charges were filed at the time, and the shooters returned to Parkway Gardens as legends of the Woodlawn Trenches. June 7, 2014, Washington Park, Chicago. The relentless blood feud between the 6000 block and the MOB circle claimed a major frontline soldier in the early hours of a Saturday morning. Around 1:30 a.m., 18-year-old Brian Weekly, known to the world as Lil Scrap, a high-profile shooter for MOB, was caught in an alley on the 5600 block of South Wabash Avenue. In a surgical strike credited to the duo of Just Blow and Lil Boo from 600, Scrap was targeted with overwhelming force. He was struck multiple times and was pronounced dead at the scene. A 20-year-old man with him was also critically wounded in the barrage. Police pursued a black car fleeing the scene onto the Dan Ryan Expressway, but the shooters managed to vanish into the night. Lil Scrap was a foundational member of MOB and had survived 2 previous shooting incidents, but this third encounter proved fatal. His death was a massive score for 600, fueling the creation of Scrap Gang by MOB and leading to a wave of immediate violent retaliation. No one was immediately charged, and the shooters returned to their territory as legends of the 600 MOB war. June 30th, 2014, Bronzeville, Chicago. The war between the 6000 block and 051 Young Money claimed another young life during a violent summer storm. Around 10:40 p.m., 17-year-old Michael Patton, known to the streets as Polo, repping 051 Young Money, was standing with a 15-year-old friend on the 600 block of East 52nd Place, just blocks from the Obama residence. In a clinical execution credited by the streets to Lil Boo, the leader of 600, a black van pulled up to the pair. Someone inside the vehicle unleashed a barrage of gunfire through the pouring rain. Polo was struck multiple times in the chest and collapsed into a puddle on the pavement. A neighbor, hearing the shots over the thunder, rushed out to hold Polo's hand and encourage him to hang in there, but the teen succumbed to his injuries before paramedics could arrive. He was pronounced dead at 11:08 p.m. The 15-year-old with him survived a gunshot wound to the arm. The hit was a significant score for the 600 lineup, removing a rising member of the 051 circle in a bold late-night strike. No arrests were made that night as the van vanished into the storm, leaving Polo's family and set to mourn another loss in a blood feud that was rapidly consuming the youth of the South Side. March 27, 2015, Avalon Park, Chicago. The friction between the Only the Family OTF camp and the 051 Young Money circle claimed a pivotal figure in the early hours of a Friday morning. Around 1:50 a.m., 24-year-old Uchenna Agena, known to the industry and the streets as OTF Chino or Chino Dola, the longtime manager for Lil Durk, was sitting in a red Chevy Camaro outside the Stony Sub restaurant on the 8400 block of South Stony Island Avenue. In a clinical and high-stakes hit credited by the streets to Melly from 051 Young Money, a gunman approached the vehicle on foot and unleashed a barrage of shots. Chino was struck multiple times, including a fatal wound to the head. A friend in the car immediately sped away, driving Chino to Advocate Trinity Hospital, but he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The timing of the execution was particularly grim, as Chino had spent the previous afternoon meeting with Chicago Bulls star Joakim Noah to discuss anti-violence initiatives and the Rock Your Drop campaign. His death was a massive blow to Lil Durk's professional and personal inner circle, occurring less than a year after the loss of OTF Nunu. No arrests were made at the scene, and while the red Camaro sat taped off outside the emergency room, the shooter, Melly, vanished, further solidifying his reputation as a high-level specialist in the ongoing war against the 4600 OTF Alliance. April 3rd, 2015, Washington Park, Chicago. The war between the 600 Block and the Melrose Alliance, 051 YMMOB, Jaro, reached a massive turning point with the elimination of the 600 general. Around 11:30 a.m., 22-year-old Jerome Anderson, known globally as Lil Boo, the co-founder and strategic leader of 600, was walking near the 5800 block of South King Drive in a high-stakes coordinated hit involving a super group of rival heavy hitters, credited by the streets to Bebe, MOB, Motor, Jaro City, Uchi, 051YM, and Arrow, 051YM, a gold-colored vehicle pulled alongside the 600 leader. A barrage of gunfire erupted, striking Lil Boo multiple times. As he attempted to flee, he collapsed on the pavement and was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Lil Boo's death was the ultimate get-back for the loss of Polo and OTF Chino, occurring just 1 week after Chino's execution. As the primary architect of the 600 set, his fall was a catastrophic blow to the BD Alliance and left a power vacuum in the 6000 block. The shooters vanished into the late morning traffic, leaving the neighborhood in a state of shock as the news spread that one of the most respected figures in the drills era had been taken off the board. April 20th, 2015, Washington Park, Chicago. The friction between Tyquan World and the Black Disciple Alliance claimed another life in a broad daylight strike on the historic FrontStreet strip. Around 2:45 p.m., 18-year-old Marshawn Fleming, known to the streets as Capo, repping FrontStreet, was caught in the 60,000 block of South King Drive. In a clinical execution credited by the streets to TB, Terry Berry from Tyquan World, a gunman opened fire striking Capo. The hit was a bold move, occurring in the heart of rival territory during a period of high alert following the death of Lil Boo just weeks earlier. Capo was rushed to Stroger Hospital but was pronounced dead at 3:54 p.m. Capo was a well-known member of the FrontStreet Circle, and his loss was felt heavily across the 300 and 600 alliance. For TB, the hit further solidified his reputation as a top-tier specialist for the younger generation of Woodlawn. No arrests were made at the scene, and the shooter vanished into the Parkway Gardens/Washington Park area, leaving the Owen FrontStreet to mourn another fallen soldier in a war that showed no signs of slowing down. May 24th, 2015, Bronzeville, Chicago. The Memorial Day weekend violence took a personal and devastating turn in the long-standing war between 051 Young Money and THF 46. Around 8:15 p.m., 15-year-old Raheem Damron, repping THF 46, was caught in an alley on the 800 block of East 45th Street in a high-stakes hit credited to the 051 duo of Melly and Ario. A light-colored sedan rolled through the alley and unleashed a barrage of gunfire. Raheem was struck multiple times and died at the scene, while a 14-year-old boy with him was shot in the foot. The location of the hit was particularly significant, occurring on the same block where THF's Black had been killed 3 years prior. Raheem was the stepson of THF 46 leader Bezu, making the execution a direct and deeply personal strike against the set's leadership. The scene was chaotic as dozens of family members swarmed the alley, their screams echoing through the rain. This murder became one of the most cited moments in the 051 THF feud, as it followed a previous incident where Raheem had allegedly shot at Melly and Ario. No arrests were made that night, and the shooters vanished into the Bronzeville darkness, leaving a legacy of grief and a renewed vow of vengeance from the 4600 block. July 22nd, 2015, Washington Park, Chicago. The friction between the 6000 block and the MOB circle reached a boiling point in a high-profile execution that left the neighborhood bracing for war. Around 9:40 p.m., 26-year-old Carlton Stello Singleton, a respected figure and driver for 600, was driving a silver Dodge Charger south on State Street. As he reached the intersection of 59th and State, the hit was initiated. In an ambush credited by the streets to Bebe from MOB, shooters on the sidewalk in Slash or from a red sedan unleashed a barrage of gunfire into the Charger. Stello was struck in the head and slumped over the wheel as the vehicle came to a halt. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Stello was a foundational member of the 600 Circle, often seen in music videos with 600 Breezy and acting as a primary driver for for the set's top factors. His death caused immediate chaos at the scene. His mother and sisters collapsed in grief as a crowd of 40 people gathered, shouting at police. Local activists and gang members alike warned that the 59th Street was going to be hot as a firecracker, as Stello's loss was seen as a major blow to the Black Disciple Alliance. No one was immediately taken into custody, and the shooters vanished into the night, leaving the O and 600 to plot their next move in an increasingly one-sided summer feud. August 31st, 2015, Kenwood, Chicago, the precision war between THF-46 and 051 Young Money claimed another veteran life in a strike just blocks from the Obama residence. Around 8 p.m., 35-year-old Tyrus Jackson, known to the streets as Wank, a respected figure from 051 Young Money, was targeted in the 4900 block of South Drexel Boulevard in an execution credited by the streets to Westbrook from THF-46. Wank was caught in a high-stakes ambush. The details of the shooting remain murky to investigators, but the result was definitive. Wank was struck and rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in critical condition. He was pronounced dead at 9:04 p.m. Wank was an older, influential member of the 051 circle, and his loss was a strategic victory for the 4600 block, coming just months after the high-profile death of Raheem. The hit on Wank signaled that THF-46 was maintaining a relentless pace in their campaign to dismantle 051's leadership and veteran ranks. No suspects were immediately apprehended, and Westbrook's reputation as a primary factor for THF continued to grow in the shadows of the South Side. September 19, 2016, Kenwood, Chicago, the brutal cycle of retaliation between 051 Young Money and THF-46 claimed one of its youngest victims on a Saturday evening. Around 7:30 p.m., 14-year-old Tyquan Poindexter, repping THF-46, was walking with a 15-year-old friend in the 4400 block of South Greenwood Avenue when a vehicle pulled alongside them. In a drive-by strike credited by the streets to Arrow from 051 Young Money, a gunman inside the car opened fire. Tyquan was struck in the head and died instantly on the scene. His 15-year-old friend, an honor student, was hit twice in the leg but survived. The shooting occurred shortly after an altercation at nearby Kennecott Park, though the teens were caught while simply walking through the neighborhood. Tyquan was a freshman at Wendell Phillips Academy and a wrestler. His mother had only just relented to let him go out and play basketball. While family members fought against the gangbanger label, the streets recognized the hit as a direct strike against the THF territory. The execution of such a young affiliate further darkened the feud, as 051 continued to apply high-pressure tactics against the 4600 block. No immediate arrests were made, and the shooter vanished back into the 051 territory. June 10, 2016, Washington Park, Chicago, the relentless blood feud between 051 Young Money and the THF Alliance, 4446, reached a boiling point during the hottest day of the year. Around 8:45 p.m., 26-year-old Terry Bates Jr., known to the streets as T-Beard, repping 051 Young Money, was on the 200 block of West Garfield Boulevard with another man when they were caught in a high-stakes ambush. In a coordinated hit credited by the streets to a specialized duo, Rome from THF-46 and Teeman from THF-44, two shooters on foot closed the distance and opened fire. T-Bear was struck multiple times in the body, while the 27-year-old with him was shot in the chest and leg. T-Berg was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, but he was pronounced dead at 10:35 p.m. The execution of T-Berg was a significant tactical strike for the THF Alliance, as it targeted a veteran member of 051 in a highly visible area. The presence of shooters from both 44 and 46 highlighted the deep cooperation between the sets in their shared goal of dismantling 051's ranks. No arrests were made at the scene, and the shooters vanished into the summer night, leaving the Melrose Circle to mourn another foundational loss in the ongoing war for the South Side. June 13, 2016, Inglewood, Chicago, the war between the 6000 block and the MOB circle reached a fever pitch with the elimination of one of the city's most prolific hunters. Around 11:54 a.m., 18-year-old Jordan Liggins, known globally as Bebe, a premier specialist for MOB, was found unresponsive in a vehicle on the 6500 block of South Ross Avenue, in a high-stakes hit that significantly shifted the momentum of the Southside conflict. Bebe was targeted while sitting in a car in what is often considered Lamron territory. While street lore suggests he may have been set up or backdoored by individuals from Wooga World, the execution is widely credited by the trenches to a lethal duo from the BD Alliance, Bite Down from 600 and Wu Thang from Duke Squad. Bebe was struck multiple times in the head and hand, ensuring he was dead at the scene. Bebe was a legendary figure within the MOB 051 Alliance, credited with some of the most high-profile strikes against the Black Disciple sets, including the hits on Blood Money and Lil Boo. His death was a massive score for the 600 or O Block Alliance and sparked immediate vows of revenge from his circle, including from his close associate KY MOB. No arrests were made at the scene and the killers vanished, leaving MOB to mourn the loss of their top-tier soldier in a war that was rapidly turning into a cycle of eye for an eye carnage. July 17, 2016, Englewood, Chicago, the rivalry between the younger generation of Tyquan World and the old block frontline claimed a rising factor in a broad daylight strike. Around 11:25 a.m., 18-year-old Shareno Gatewood, known to the streets as Chano, a high-profile member of O Block, was targeted in the 5700 block of South Union Avenue in a clinical execution credited to the lethal pairing of Poppy from Tyquan World and Can't Get Right from STL EBT. Chano was struck in the upper chest. The shooter or shooters closed the distance, ensuring the hit was successful before vanishing from the Englewood block. Chano was rushed to St. Bernard Hospital, but the wound was fatal. He was pronounced dead at 11:45 a.m. Chano was a beloved and highly active member of the O Block Circle, and his death sent shockwaves through Parkway Gardens. The hit was viewed as a major score for the TW's STL coalition, further intensifying the blood feud between the sets. In the aftermath, members like DQ from O Block would frequently mention Chano's name when discussing the Get Back era that followed, as the O scrambled to retaliate for the loss of one of their most promising young soldiers. No suspects were apprehended at the time, leaving the shooters to return to their territory as legends of the Woodlawn Englewood War. September 21, 2016, Washington Park, Chicago, the tactical war between THF-46 and MOB reached a brutal peak with the targeted execution of 25-year-old Eric Banks, known to the streets as a boy, a high-profile member of MOB. Around 2 p.m., a boy was near his home on the corner of East 57th Street and State when a tan Buick pulled alongside him. In a surgical strike later detailed by Cook County prosecutors, the hit was carried out by a THF-46 duo, Tay-Tay, Deshaun Garrett, and Gucci Deontay Beaudry. According to court records, Gucci was behind the wheel while Tay-Tay emerged from the back seat, unleashing a hail of gunfire. As E-Boy attempted to flee, he was struck and collapsed. In a final act of clinical aggression, the shooter stood over him and continued to fire, striking E-Boy in the head, ribs, and back. Police recovered 11 shell casings from the scene. E-Boy was rushed to Stroger Hospital but succumbed to his injuries shortly after. The execution was captured on surveillance video, which eventually led to both men being charged with first-degree murder. The hit was a massive blow to the MOB circle, removing a veteran soldier in broad daylight. Despite Gucci's attempt to have the Buick repainted to hide the evidence, both shooters were eventually denied bond, marking a rare instance where the legal system caught up with the high-stakes hunters of the 051 MOB THF feud. December 1st, 2016, South Shore, Chicago, the relentless blood feud between 051 Young Money and THF-46 claimed another life as the year drew to a close. Around 8 to 5 p.m., 22-year-old Trevon Dickerson, repping THF-46, was caught in a high-stakes ambush on the 6800 block of South Cornell Avenue. In a clinical execution credited by the streets to a specialized duo from 051, Melly and Tristo, Shooters closed the distance and opened fire. Trayvon was struck multiple times in the head and abdomen, ensuring he was dead at the scene. When officers arrived in response to the shots fired call, they found him unresponsive. He was pronounced dead at 8:22 p.m. The hit was a significant strike for the Melrose Alliance. As Melly continued his campaign against the THF front line, Trayvon was a well-known affiliate of the 4600 block, and his execution in the South Shore area highlighted the reach and mobility of 051's top hunters. No suspects were immediately taken into custody, leaving the shooters to vanish into the night and the THF Alliance to mourn another soldier lost to their most bitter rivals. December 4th, 2016, Woodlawn, Chicago, the war between the 64th Block and the STL EBT Alliance saw one of its most high-profile and brazen executions in the early morning hours. Around 3:10 a.m., 23-year-old Antron Young, known to the world as Big A, a legendary veteran and top-tier factor for O Block, was inside Sammy's Grill and Restaurant on the 6300 block of South King Drive in a clinical strike that was partially captured on surveillance footage. A lethal duo from the STL EBT Alliance, G.I. Joe and Can't Get Right, entered the restaurant. They opened fire at close range, striking Big A in the face and body. The execution was so swift and aggressive that 2 other men in the restaurant were also wounded in the crossfire. Big A collapsed on the floor of the establishment and was pronounced dead at the scene. The death of Big A was a catastrophic loss for Parkway Gardens. He was a foundational member of the set and a close associate of the neighborhood's most prominent figures. The scene outside was pure chaos, with women screaming monsters, as the realization set in that one of the O's most respected soldiers had been taken out right on the front King Drive. While the streets immediately identified the hitters, the hit remained a pillar of the STLO block feud, marking a major score for the younger generation of the Tuca camp. February 14, 2017, South Shore, Chicago. The war for the South Side reached a definitive and historic turning point on Valentine's Day with the fall of one of the most feared figures in the Black Disciple Alliance. Around 11:50 a.m., 23-year-old James Johnson, known globally as T-Roy, the premier specialist and heart of Old Block, was targeted inside a convenience store on the 2000 block of East 71st Street. In a high-stakes hit that was captured on surveillance footage, TB, Terry Berry from Tyquan World, followed T-Roy into the establishment. Recognizing his target, TB pulled a firearm and shot T-Roy in the chest at close range. T-Roy attempted to flee deeper into the store, but collapsed. He was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 12:38 p.m. T-Roy was widely considered the most dangerous member of Parkway Gardens and was the best friend of King Von. His death was a catastrophic blow to the BD Alliance. The execution of T-Roy by TB was seen as the ultimate score for the younger generation of Tyquan World, effectively decapitating the O Block front line. The aftermath of this hit sparked an unprecedented wave of violence as the O and the 600 sets vowed total war and retaliation for their fallen general. No immediate arrests were made, and the footage of the incident became a grim artifact of the drill era.